The CWL Paras, aka ESWC, has officially come to an end, and I'm thinking about making a little bit of a, I guess you could kind of say a series on my channel, kind of relating to the fact of making episodes known as what we learned from. Instead of making like a recap, because I know that a lot of people really know what a recap is. They know the placings where they can even go to Call of Duty wikis and know everything that I'm about to say. But along with kind of going over the basics of the placements and stuff like that, the groups, the open bracket, how that kind of went, I also want to talk about like topics, like storylines that kind of come from these events, because there's a lot of stuff that goes down. And I think especially with where Call of Duty is at its current state, as far as like the level of competition, the inconsistencies of overall placements for a lot of top teams, there's a lot of stuff to talk about. It's not just, plain Jane, OpTic wins this event or FaZe wins this event, MV looking good. Like, everyone at any time could lose and win. It's really odd. And I hate to say that because it doesn't make sense from an analysis point of view, but it's the way things are right now. And I think it's honestly shaken up the scene and honestly made it a lot more interesting to watch because you don't know who's going to win. You don't know what to expect. So first things first, before I really hop into that video, I want to really say that I appreciate everyone's overall communication to me in the comments about me adding a timer to my videos. It was just really just a way for me personally to kind of like limit myself from talking too much, but you guys were very vocal about that, saying, we do like the timer idea or we don't like the timer idea, but they were all constructive criticism ideas that you wanted toward my videos, and I really appreciate that, because knowing that means that you guys really care about the video. So I'm going to do my best to include a timer, just a mental timer to myself to make sure I don't go too far over, but also to make sure that I don't stray away from the fact of adding in information that really matters, that really kind of categorizes the video. So I'm going to do my best to find a happy medium, and of course, if you guys want to, feel free to always leave constructive criticism, because it really helps me out. So I wanted to add that in, to give you a little bit of a post message before the video starts. So first things first, I think it's only right that we do go over the placements before we talk about some storylines, some things that happened throughout the event. The prize pool, of course, was $100,000, and we'll go in order. By the way, if you guys want to, all of this information that I'm talking about right now can be found in the description. Make sure to follow Call of Duty Sports Wikis on Twitter, as well as their website. It's what everyone really follows, to be honest. 7th through 8th came Fnatic and Evil Geniuses. 5th through 6th found both Splice and Epsilon Esports. In 4th was Team Infuse. In 3rd came Rise Nation. In 2nd came FaZe Clan, and in 1st came OpTic Gaming. As you guys can see as well, you can also notice the pro points along with the overall prize money that went to each team respectively. So I think it's also really quickly we can go over the open bracket, get a little idea as to where these teams placed, how the pools kind of broke down a little bit, because for those who don't know, essentially it was the top 4 seeds from the pool play, which came into groups. So first seed goes into Group D, second seed goes to Group C, so on and so forth. So E United, technically, they had the first seed. If they make it through, they automatically go to Group D. But since they lose, that next following seed, which would be the second seed, ends up automatically going over to D. So to me, my predictions were absolutely ruined whenever I made them, because I really didn't take that into consideration, because one team completely changes every group, and I really should have thought about that ahead of time, and I didn't. So I apologize. Not going to be doing that ever again. So LG ended up making it out of their first spot. Kind of surprising. E United, it's a different environment for them. That's my whole reasoning why I think that this is a thing that happened. They're a younger team, and to be honest, I was expecting them to maybe make it pretty far in this tournament, maybe make it through pools, but after that, I thought they wouldn't make it, but it turns out they wouldn't even make it to pools. LG would kind of end their run there, excluding Saints and adding Panda to the team just for ESWC, because Saints is not allowed to travel out of the country, and before you ask, I don't know why. In the second area of the open bracket, it was actually Epsilon, who ended up beating ALG, so TGC Blue gets out in the semifinals. Kind of surprising to see after a pretty good run through the not the open bracket, excuse me. Well, technically through the open bracket, but as well through the losers bracket at Atlanta. They can't get it forward, and the boys from Epsilon, aka the guys from Fab, who ended up placing 4th at Call of Duty XP back in Black Ops 3 last year. Well, not really last year, kind of last year actually. Either way, they ended up making it through. So props to those guys. Really haven't really been on too many people's radars, just because of their lack of performance at MLG Atlanta and the fact that they haven't really had a whole lot going for them as far as pro points are considered. Third area that we have is going to be E6, who nearly is able to take out TK, winning that one in a Game 3 situation. And I want to point out that I did bring up Giants versus G2. Said Giants has a very good possibility to take that particular match. They ended up doing that, and not giving props to myself, but it's just the overall fact that I like NA squads, but it's getting to the point where you can't just take the NA squad by default. It's not just like, oh, this random European, this random APAC team versus these guys who are pretty well known. No, you can't do that anymore. That's just the way the scene has developed in the last few years, is that you can't default by choosing a North American team anymore. It's just not the way that it is. Granted, if you see a team that's just not known whatsoever, I mean, Giants has a pretty good record. They're known as one of the top teams in Spain. I've been playing actually in a Spanish league for a very long time throughout the year for Infinite Warfare up to this point. I wouldn't say for a very long time, but they've been kind of introduced to that quite a bit. But this is actually a pretty difficult, I think, area to kind of get out of from the open bracket because you do have E6, obviously. You do have Giants, you have Echo Fox, you have TK, you have the other TGC as well. You have a lot of really talented teams who are kind of in this group, and a lot of them, I think, could have easily made it out as far as like a predictions point of view. Not easily because of how difficult the group is, but it would have been easy to predict any one of these teams because of the amount of talent that's in this particular area, like I said. Of course, E6 ends up winning and beating TK 2-1. Really unfortunate for the guys on TK. They can't really catch a break at the moment, and I'm really curious to see what they do. Putting that in air quotes, and I'll say that for later. Last part of the open bracket was obviously ESWC, who ended up winning this one. Pretty standard. Envy and EG end up meeting in the finals for that particular spot in the open, from the open, and Envy ends up making it through. Can you imagine, though, if EG would have made it through, how that maybe could have influenced quite a bit of things? Obviously, in the end, the overall placements, EG still makes it pretty far, so you got to give props to them. All right, so now we know kind of how the open bracket went. We're going to touch briefly on the pools because I don't want to talk about them for a very long time. Pool A ended up going OpTic Gaming's favor. To be honest, kind of expected as far as like their overall group was considered. Once you looked at it, the old Orbit, aka Red Reserve, definitely put up a fight. Actually took that game pretty far versus the OG side, but they were able to win. Kind of unfortunate from the Team 3G guys. Didn't really see a whole lot from them. Was hoping to see quite a bit. But it ended up happening. Pool B went Rise Nation's way, Infuse coming in second. And LG, obviously after making it through the open bracket, can make a little bit of noise, but since you have that fill-in of Panda instead of Saints, I think Panda had one of the lowest KDs at this event as well. So to say Panda really made a positive influence on the team, to me, probably isn't existent. It was just kind of the fact that we had this guy. Let's see what we can do with him. And unfortunately, it doesn't really work out for them too much in the end. Kind of unfortunate from Supremacy as well. Supremacy looked pretty good. I know they ended up losing to Infused, which I thought could have been a pretty close matchup. That one actually ends up going down to a Game 5 scenario. So there were some good moments from Supremacy. They're known as an online team, and I think this is one of their first lands, actually an actual roster together officially. So I was hoping to see quite a bit of noise from them, but I guess you could say in some ways that online title that they've been kind of given for the French scene is going to remain under them until they can prove themselves further. So, moving on here to Pool C, we end up having FaZe and Team Envious making it in the first and second spot. FaZe ends up beating Envious in a pretty close 3-1 match. Definitely would recommend going back and watching that one. A lot of details went on in that particular series that kind of dictated a lot of what happened throughout the tournament. And then Splice ends up coming in that third spot. Extrovert comes in fourth. Extrovert EU, aka the X-Aware. And Splice, granted, I would have really liked them to come out of their pool. I would have expected them to come out of their pool. But when you have FaZe and Envy, two titans of the North American scene, it's never easy to make that happen. And of course, we do have in some ways the rematch of Call of Duty XP, at least the organizations. You have 6 out of the 8 players who were involved in that Call of Duty XP exchange between Envy and Splice last year. So during Black Ops 3. So, maybe a little bit of rivalry there, potentially, but Envy ends up winning that one 3-0 regardless. Moving on here to Pool D briefly. Fnatic tops their group. Cloud9 is nowhere to be found. Elevate only beats Cloud9, but can't really do too much after that. Kind of back and forth games. Fnatic actually barely beat E6 as well. They won that one in a Game 5. They beat Elevate in a Game 5. They beat Cloud9 3-1. There was something about Fnatic. I think this is actually a perfect transition that we can actually make because I want to talk actually about the side of Fnatic and the depth of Europe now, because we're starting to see the European scene develop in a way to where it's not just one team. It's not just, it wasn't like last year. It was just like, oh, well, you have Millennium, then you have Splice toward the end of the year, and then you have, Infuse, like they're kind of back there too. They can make a little bit of noise, but they just can't really get to that next level. Now, to me, I think the European scene is in a great spot. I was very surprised and shocked to see the performance that we actually ended up seeing from Fnatic. Fnatic, of course, team composed of Tommy, Sunny B, Scraps, and Wiskin. For those who don't know too much about that roster, basically, at the beginning of Infinite Warfare, it was rumored and basically going to happen that Tommy and Swanee were going to team for Infinite Warfare. Millennium splits up. Both Tommy and Swanee go their opposite ways. Mad Cat and Jared end up joining over on Splice to fill in, obviously, for the other 2 players who end up leaving that team. So that obviously leaves up to a little bit of debate. Who do they join? Two guys from Epsilon, both young guns, both Scraps and Sunny B. Scraps known for being on the Rampage Tempo team. Early on, I would say like maybe a little bit earlier than halfway through Black Ops 3, he was known as, like, that team was known as like an online squad, and they weren't able to qualify through relegation, I believe, to make it into the CWL EU. So that obviously gives a little bit of a damper on them. They end up joining over on Epsilon. Sunny B finds his way there also, and kind of like known as two young gun players who are very talented in their own regard, but can't really get it done when it comes down to a LAN setting. And I think a lot of that had to do, honestly, in my opinion, with the issue of not having a crazy amount of leadership. Because you have, I think it was like, what, Rady and Moose on that team? And granted, I think those guys are good, but do they have like that same leadership mentality that a guy like Marky B has, that a guy like Tommy has? So they join alongside of Tommy, right? Everything's looking pretty good. Swanee, unfortunately, for personal issues or personal reasons, ends up leaving this team before it even really forms an organization. And Scraps basically says, hey, I have a brother who's pretty talented, twin brother, I believe. If they're not twin brothers, they look exactly alike. I'm not even 100% sure, but they look exactly alike. I'm not even sure if they're twin brothers or not. Wiskin, the only thing that I know about Wiskin is that he played for Bulldog Esports and has kind of been under the radar. So essentially, you get one of the most known players in history in Swanee to later be substituted in for a guy who, this is his first major organization in Wiskin. So to have that pressure on your back, especially after not having a stellar performance at Atlanta either, there's a lot of pressure on these guys, especially when you go back to ESWC, where essentially the spotlight is all on the European teams, right? When you go to ESWC, when you are at a European event, the North American teams, they're expected to perform, right? If they don't perform, obviously, things happen, but let's these guys are going to have a consistent run. North American, regardless, is going to have a consistent run. They're most likely going to win the tournament, if not have a bunch of guys in the top 4 or whatever, which they do, right? Now, there actually are a few stats that I want to bring up. Both of these stats, or most of these stats that I'm going to be bringing up, are actually on the Call of Duty Esports Wiki's site. So if you guys want to check that out, like I said, it is going to be a link in the description. It has full player stats, full results, and I think it even has the scoreboards as well. So if you guys want to check that for yourselves, you can obviously do that. But I want to show you guys the Fnatic S&D KDs that they end up having from this tournament. Here are the two players that I was bringing up. Okay, this is their Search and Destroy KD, right? For the guys on Fnatic, this is Scraps and Wiskin, both brothers. Wiskin, like I said, the newest addition to this team, not a very well-known player when it comes down to this roster. And S&D KD, Scraps ends up having a 1.88, along with averaging 7 kills per game. Then you have Wiskin, who's right behind him, getting 1.84 KD with 8.42 kills per game. That's insane. For the amount of games that they played, granted, they played 4, 5, 6, 7, different games. That is incredibly impressive to see out of these guys. To have that many search and destroys and to have a 1.8 KD along with, just between themselves, right? Kills per game. That's 15.42 kills per game just between them. Just between those two guys, you are averaging 15 kills. So I talked about Fnatic just to say this, that I think right now the EU team talent pool is a lot more deep than we originally thought. Whenever Splice splits apart, whenever that team splits apart, the second place team, I call it XP, the second place team splits apart. That to me was like, okay, European scene, they're damaged quite a bit. And I think they were pretty much damaged by that. I think without question, that hurt them immensely. So the rivalries that you have between those two teams, along with Infuse starting to make a rise, beating them in back-to-back tournaments and whatnot. So they're starting to make a little bit of a run. Infuse has beaten a crazy amount of North American teams. They ended up finishing, top 4 at this event? I think it's placings from what I said. They ended up finishing 4th in front of Splice, in front of Epsilon, in front of Fnatic. They're the highest placed European team at this tournament. They're up there now, too. Red Reserve, aka Old Orbit, starts to fall a little bit behind, I think, of the overall rankings. Then you have Epsilon starting to make some noise. You have Fnatic, who's starting to make some noise. 3G has made some noise in the past. You have Imperial, who's made some noise. The Old Aware Squad, who's been known as, who could potentially make some noise as well. There's so many different European teams who, to me, can be considered and could be in that top 10 overall team comparison right now. Now, as far as the overall placements, granted, 4 out of the 8 teams were European. I will, in some ways, credit that, but I also discredit that because a lot of the North American squads were in the open bracket. However, though, it's still a very great placement to see. That's a very important stat to bring up. That there were a number of different European teams who showed up at this event. I'm not going to lie, I've been doubting them quite a bit. If you watch my predictions video for Atlanta, if you watch my predictions video for ESWC, I haven't had that many European teams making out of pools. I haven't had that many European teams placing high in my top 4, top 5, top 6 lists. And I think it's going to start to change now. Now that I've talked about Europe a little bit, I also want to focus on the grand finals that end up taking place, as well as Cloud9's performance, because obviously I'm going to be making a roster change video soon about teams I think will make a roster change. If by the time that video does come out, if teams have already made roster changes, I'll be updating you guys on those as well to give my thoughts on those. So stay tuned for that. Obviously, I know I'm known previously for being, Mr. Roster Mania. Been known for tweeting at roster changes and stuff like that, kind of giving you guys a little bit of knowledge and under my thoughts of what rosters can do and perform. But one team that I was definitely thinking that could potentially and should make a roster change is Cloud9. And I know there was a quote that I'm actually going to directly take from Maven, because he said this actually on stream. I don't think he was allowed to say this on stream, but he ended up saying it anyway. Potentially, it was kind of leaked that Aches, ended up saying from Cloud9, I've got 2 superstars, a.k.a. Lacefield and Assault, who don't give a crap. He said different words in crap, but I'm just saying that to keep everything PG here. But that just goes to show the work ethic that kind of goes on with the Cloud9 team, right? He also posted on Twitter a little bit later after that entire event was taking place once the stream was over. I was actually able to catch this before I make my video right now. And he said, just an update since I've seen dumb posts, C9 will have no changes as their performance issue was attitude and work ethic based, not skill based. And then he later went on to say, when you have events back-to-back like that with no time in between, positive momentum carries the same effect as negative momentum, which I think is good. I'm glad to hear him say that for a number of different reasons, right? Now, I wanted to go back to the thought that I was having before and kind of correlate the two in a sense, right? Cloud9, to me, has talent on this roster. Without question. You have 2 guys who both Assault and Lacefield have proven themselves to be top slayers throughout the game. At Vegas, that was a major reason as to why they had so much success, which is that those guys, as credit, they are performing very, very well. The issue that Cloud9 has had is at Vegas, really. To me, that was not a second place that I thought was worthy of them. And granted, they end up... Okay, so what I'm basically trying to say is that Cloud9 plays second place, and I will 100% give them credit for that, because why? They got there. They clutched everything that they needed to. They won all those game 5s. Granted, they lost all those uplinks. They started to, and somebody's nearly get reverse sweep, then they nearly reverse sweep someone else. There was a number of different game 5s that they went to, and they ended up clutching those. Like I said, give full credit to them. But it's such a sketchy way. It's not really a way that I would prefer a team to make it as far as they did in that fashion. That post was meant for those guys to read. The post where he says, like I just read, that we have 2 guys who have talent but aren't willing to put in the work. They don't have the work ethic, and he said it's not based on their skill. It's based on their work ethic. And if you had watched Cloud9's streams, if you'd watched their streams coming into a number of different events, and granted, Aches hasn't been streaming as of recently, and I don't think any of the other guys stream. Also, I think I think Lacefield does occasionally, but not very often. If you had watched those streams, the reason why Aches had all these little spiels going on about Assault, man, you need to go to the gym at 3 in the morning, come play some GBs, or start playing some of these games, whatever. It's the fact that he saw like something in them, and there's something that's good there. But they're just not willing to put in the work. Like, apparently, maybe the team scrimmage aren't there. And I'm not obviously going to blame it on the young guns and then say that they're the issue. Maybe it's someone else. Maybe it's Aches' fault. Maybe it's Ricky's fault. I don't personally know that. But according to Aches, the work ethic isn't there for them. So they're not willing to put in the work along with the skill that they have, which results in what is obviously known as laziness. They're not willing to put in the work. And to be honest, I think after a placement that they had at Call of Duty XP, beating OpTic Gaming, shutting down the Dynasty, granted, they have not an average placement. I think a placement higher than maybe some people would have predicted them to get, but taking out OpTic Gaming, then heading into their next tournament, which is obviously at MLG Vegas. They end up finishing second, right behind Rise Nation. Granted, they have a lot of very close games, like I said, but getting second in that tournament, I think, really, to be honest, that fed their egos. Like, that fed their ego that they were a top team in the game. They can't be messed with. If they work on a certain game type, they'll be fine. They'll be good. There's nothing to worry about. But this has been an issue with me that I've seen in Lacefield especially, is that to me there's a difference between having emotion as a player and then being emotional. Obviously, having emotion is good. You can use that to be very talented in games. You can use that to your advantage, but being emotional is where you start to take a toll on your team. When you're not calling out, when you're having issues, you're saying, oh my gosh, these guys are a joke, or you're saying a certain line that is negative before your call out, that delays everything for your team. It puts everyone in a bad mood. Plus, call outs are delayed by a good 3 or 4 seconds. It changes everything. And to me, Call of Duty is a crazy, especially in Infinite Warfare, about communication and teamwork. And for the fact that they're obviously not showing that, that's a major issue. Now, am I glad to see that they're sticking together? I am. I'm always glad to see rosters stick together. There's been many times, especially as of recently, where teams have stuck together and it's kind of worked out for them, or they've at least improved as players in their own way. So I think it's honestly a good thing, rather, to see them start and at least be minded in the fact that it's only been 2 tournaments. It's been back-to-back tournaments. And I actually said this heading into ESWC. There's not a whole lot of time to work on your gameplay. There's not a whole lot of time to practice those issues that you had at Atlanta, because what are you going to do? You maybe wait 1 or 2 days, then you travel to ESWC. So there's not a whole lot of time to work on your overall game. There's not a whole lot of time to work on the issues that you had besides communication, maybe watching VODs and whatnot. There's no way to actually go in-game and practice until the actual event happens itself. I talked about Cloud9 for a long time, probably going to cut quite a bit of that out. The last thing that I want to talk about is obviously the grand final, which ended up taking place between OpTic Gaming and FaZe. You guys can obviously see the bracket, how everything kind of ended up lining out. I have a number of different stats that I can actually give on the team who ended up winning this tournament, which is obviously OpTic Gaming. OpTic Gaming ends up finishing obviously 3-0 in their group, being Red Reserve, Epsilon, and Team 3G, making it to the winners bracket, where they have a flawless run to the championship bracket and also heading into the grand final. Do not drop a single map. Finishing, I believe, 21-3 in overall map count, which is vintage OG. Crimsix has officially won every single ESWC, I think, except for one that was like a minor Canadian event. But besides that, every major tournament, I had to be specific, every major tournament, Crimsix has won that. He's now a 5-time ESWC champion, with Cole, with EG, and I believe the last 3 with OpTic Gaming in a row. So credit to OpTic Gaming as well for winning the last 3 ESWCs. Go to show how long this roster has been together. The core guys have been together as a team, what they can obviously achieve together. Like I said, they have a flawless winners bracket. As far as their encounters with FaZe, they've had 3 encounters in the last 3 matchups they've had so far in Infinite Warfare, and in those 3 encounters, they've only lost 1 map. 1 map. So what used to be the issue of FaZe beating them for 2 constant years, tides have started to change where OpTic doesn't have to worry about facing off against FaZe. They are now kind of in some ways facing off against their rivals or their, I guess like Monster in the Closet. They don't have to worry about them anymore. They've officially defeated them time after time after time. First place winners, obviously, since that's actually their first place win since MLG Orlando, which was a very long time ago. For those who don't remember, that took place on August 7th, 2016. Something else that I noticed that was actually posted on the Reddit, which I think is obviously very interesting, is that officially, since Scump has won this particular tournament, he has won a championship in the last 7 Call of Duty titles. And the fact that he's only at the age of 21 is pretty darn impressive. 7 titles. Last 7 titles, he's won at least 1 championship in all of those. And like I said, I want to talk about the grand final, because essentially what ends up going on is at the beginning of the grand final, starts off, it's great. We actually ended up having an hour delay. I think that might have been because of the internet issues that were taking place. So that's obviously takes away from FaZe's momentum, who has been playing pretty much, I think, a few matches so far throughout the losers bracket, or at least have played more matches than OpTic Gaming had up until that point. So they have a lot of momentum, right? They have a lot of momentum. The hour break takes place. To me, that probably dampens it a little bit. However, though, they start to come into the first map. Things are looking pretty good. FaZe comes out in a dominant way. They start destroying the side of OpTic. There was a time where they're actually rotating over toward Barn. And for those who have been watching OpTic scrims online, this is, in some ways, known as one of their worst maps in Hardpoint is Throwback, and they always have an issue with getting Barn control. That's the Money Hill, at least one of the Money Hills, in people's opinions, on Throwback. And FaZe had literally just shut down a 3-man push through field, and Clayster did that by himself. So you know that they were starting to feel themselves. I don't know the exact score. People were posting the score, what it was. I know it was like a pretty dominant lead at the time, and I think they would have been up like around 60 to maybe 5 or something along those lines before OpTic could have made a potential push. People started to get kicked out of the lobby because of the Paris servers kicking people offline, internet issues going on in between Paris. I think there was like a fire apparently in like a local internet place. I'm not really sure what to call that exactly, which obviously caused a major issue. We have a little bit of a delay, maybe like around 20, 30, 35-minute delay. Match restarts. FaZe still looked pretty good off the start. but OpTic Gaming ends up getting more control. They realize what ended up taking place. They were very, very happy with that. Obviously, who wouldn't be? I mean, no one's gonna look at this. No one's gonna look at this particular series and be like, "Oh, well, OpTic probably was feeling pretty bad about it." No, they were happy that happened. They were stoked once they realized the reset was coming in. Gaming is able to counter. They ended up taking the first map on the back of, I believe, a pretty good performance from Formal, and also through that entire game. Something that I noticed, and I was really happy to see it, is that they were starting to let Karma roam, or kind of in some cases be a lurker. And this is something that I've been very excited to see throughout Atlanta, something that I've been obviously very excited to see throughout ESWC as well, is that they're starting to get the fact of getting Karma comfortable. And this has been an issue for me that I actually noticed toward right after Vegas, I think. Obviously, they have some issues at Vegas, don't perform the way they want to, et cetera, et cetera. And I personally was like, give Crimsix that lurker role. There were times in online scrims where I was seeing Crimsix just absolutely destroy. He would go on 5, 6, 7 sprees online versus top teams. It wasn't like they were on their GB grind and he was doing this. He was doing this versus like top teams. And it was like, maybe Crim should go back to that role. Maybe Crim shouldn't have to maybe focus around the objective or kind of stay in the back lines or try to hold a certain lane. Maybe he should be the one kind of being in the face of the opposition at all times. This is not Scump's best title as of yet. He's kind of had a little bit of a slower start to Infinite Warfare, so he's not that frontline type of guy, that guy who has the SMG in your face. He's not a big fan of the E-Red either, so it's not obviously going to work in his favor too much. But Karma, though. Karma has been looking stellar whenever they let him kind of break free. And I have loved seeing this happen. For those who know that the Karma 2-time world champion, this role of him being able to just do what he wants and to be that front line of defense has caused a lot of issues for teams. There was one particular moment where OpTic had held down Barn. I think it was maybe on the second set of rotations. So every hard point had taken place. We're now on the second side where all the hard points take place yet again. And the rotation was going from Barn over toward Bike Path. Karma rotated over toward field once they realized they had the hold. I think FaZe was kind of setting up. Karma ends up rotating by himself all the way through field toward the backside statue, flanks everyone, and kind of gets to like a little bit of an awkward spot. And he starts to find players constantly catching them off guard. And there was a number of different plays that were happening for that entire sequence where he was gaining streaks. He was going on those runs. I think he might end up finishing like maybe positive or -1 or maybe +2. Not completely going positive. But there have been a few players who, to me, I've noticed who played like that. And when they do that, that totally gives their team such a huge advantage because, granted, they might be going -1 or -2, but they're stopping the other team from getting closer and closer to that objective, kind of freeing up his teammates to have an easier time inside of the hill. One particular player that I immediately think of when I think of in your face, throwing your body at the other team, is a player from Nogvin back in Epsilon NA in Advanced Warfare, whenever it was like Royalty and him, and Swanee was actually on that team as well. Royalty, and especially Nogvin, would just run at people. They would just constantly get in their face, be in some ways like, kind of like a meat shield, if you don't want to put it that way. Just be in their face at all times, kind of catch them off guard. Karma kind of plays a similar role to that, but he's always being aware of where they're at. He's always kind of being aware that he has to go on these sprees. And I think it's honestly so good that he's playing this particular role because he knows where they're coming from. If you watch him go on these little bit of sprees that he's had at Atlanta and even at ESWC, is that he knows like where the push is coming from. And I think he's always been on that butt end of those bait and switches or those 2-on-1 gunfights that OpTic and him like to do quite a bit, whichever teammate he's doing it with. He's used to being on the butt end of those. So I think in all those engagements that he's having throughout the map, he is so used to, in my opinion, he's so used to being in those 2v1 engagements that he knows where both players are coming from. The way that a player challenges, he knows that he's going to back up, let me encounter him while the other guy doesn't have time to reset and kind of finish Karma off. He's constantly being aware of like both of these team pushes that are happening for him. I think he's honestly given them a huge advantage when it comes to their hardpoint game. They've drastically improved on breakout, which is very mistake heavy. If you make a lot of mistakes, a lot of the time you can definitely get punished for that. They're looking really good on breakout. Throwback has definitely been an issue for them, but they take it versus FaZe, and FaZe to me is known as a pretty decent throwback team as well, at least from what I've been able to witness. So they're looking pretty good when it comes down to hardpoint. Their S&Ds have been looking pretty stellar as of late, without question. Uplinks, though, can be a question at times, but like I said, OpTic, they might have found the formula. They might have found the formula that works for them, and I'm really excited to see what they can do. Granted, this might be, in my opinion, considered under a second version, like Volume 2 of the Dynasty, because it has been 6 months that they've won their last title. Granted, it has been from one title to a next. There has been a lot of breaking time between that. One last thing that I want to talk about as far as the implications of this is that obviously OpTic wins, but someone has to lose. Like I said, I think FaZe has won one map off of OpTic Gaming so far throughout their 3 engagements so far in Infinite Warfare. They're looked at as a top team coming into to IW along with the LG team. And obviously win PSX. They beat Orbit, which is now Red Reserve. They look pretty good. They don't have the performances they want. They don't have the top placement they wanted at Atlanta. Granted, there was like a few moments where they could have beat OpTic Gaming or United, whatever it may be. They lost the 2 teams who were in the grand finals. So to me, I think they deserve a higher placement than that. However, though, at the end of all of this, they end up doing a interview with both OpTic Gaming and FaZe, which to me, I'm not a huge fan of getting an interview from a team who loses, because obviously they're pretty angry. They're not excited to be on the stage, and I don't know who was interviewing them exactly, but they interview FaZe. Clayster's obviously not happy. He gives credit to OpTic, and he tries to leave the stage. And the guy who's hosting is like, can you guys just stay here just really quickly? And just the face that Clayster had just goes to show how frustrated that he was with that he had to stay on the stage and listen to the team who just beat him talk about how they did it and how they're going to continue to do it. The Call of Duty scene should be excited that happened. Like they should be stoked that Clayster hates so much to lose. And granted, I'm glad that he's a sore loser. I'm glad that Clayster is a sore loser. I'm glad that he hates to lose, because if you want if you're a team who is content with getting second, if you're a team who's content with getting third, then you're going to be content with that the rest of your life, and you're going to continue to get those placements unless you get a lucky day or something like that. I am happy that Clayster was so ticked off that he doesn't get first, that he didn't win this tournament, when in some cases, maybe they thought they were supposed to. And granted, that first hard point really sucks. That's such an awful feeling. That's such a terrible position to be in. And I think, honestly, they were in a great spot to potentially take that first hard point, because that is a massive amount of momentum that they were taking that could have easily, changed that search and destroy. That could have changed the uplink. Maybe FaZe wins the first grand final, or the first series in the grand final. That completely changes everything if they win the first hard point, in my opinion. A lot of people said, oh, no, it wouldn't change anything. Nothing would have changed. But momentum and Infinite Warfare, momentum in Call of Duty, to me, is at its all-time high. Regardless of that, though, there was actually a video that got posted that can actually link in the description if you guys are interested, where pictures are being taken like they always do, teams who end up losing, and Clayster, in a sense, first player to walk away, grabs the medal, and throws it right on his chair. There's actually a rumor that he threw it in the crowd. It doesn't look like he throws it in the crowd. He throws it on his chair, and it just goes to show he's not happy. The emotion that he shows in that particular play should be exciting for all of us, because he's not content with getting that second place. He's not content with getting a spot behind OpTic Gaming. And that there is a feeling in him that is the fact that I was dropped from this team. I was replaced by these 2 guys. And now they're beating me in tournaments. And we were supposed to be, I think the one thing that FaZe was really holding on to through a lot of their run through Black Ops 3, because everyone knows they didn't have the best run, they were not having the top placements that they were having. I think, honestly, FaZe has been a major reason why the scene has switched up so much, especially as far as NA is considered, is because of their great performances in tournaments. Is that I think one thing they were holding on to through a lot of that was that OpTic Gaming still hasn't beaten us. Is it the fact that OpTic still hasn't beaten us? They had and granted, that might not have been the case. Like, they had some good momentum here and there. They would make certain runs at tournaments and whatnot. Everyone was asking. I was even asking myself, should FaZe make a roster change? They stick through it, and even into Infinite Warfare, they get so close to finally proving everyone wrong after so many months of not winning a title, after so many months of asking, should we make a roster change? Was Advanced Warfare just a one-time game that we happened to make a run on, and then to face off in some cases against their rivals through the last few years where they haven't even faced off against them, and to finally face off against them in Infinite Warfare, and to lose on 3 separate occasions, only winning 1 map? One of those being in some cases where you feel like you got cheated in the first game, where you feel like you could have made a huge run. This video completely captures all of the anger, all of the revenge that Clayster wants to have versus OpTic. And to me, that really starts to excite things. I'm very excited to see how the scene starts to move forward with this. I think these are starting to build rivalries. Players aren't happy. The scene is growing as far as an overall player aspect. And like I said, teams are starting to have to make way, because some of these younger guys, some of these guys who are starting to make a name for themselves, they're going to start to push out the old pros. You know what I mean? They're going to start to kind of push those guys aside and say, you know what? We're here to stay. We want to win more than you guys do. We're more motivated, and you guys have kind of slacked quite a bit. And I'm really interested to see how Call of Duty ends up moving forward. I know this was a longer video. I'm going to do my best to kind of cut this one down, but be excited, because I'm very interested to see how this OpTic Gaming, FaZe, Envy, whoever you want to throw in the mix, LG, whoever, right? even European teams, even whoever you want to mention. I'm very excited to see how things start to move forward from this particular tournament and how Dallas will obviously end up playing out. But guys, if you have any thoughts, any comments below that you guys want to talk about in this video, feel free to do so. Leave any thoughts about ESWC, maybe about Dallas roster changes, any thoughts that you guys have on those as well. I'm very interested to hear your guys' thoughts about those. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in yet again. I'll see you guys all later. Have a fantastic day. And until next time, peace out.